Exercise 3K. I'm going to give you some tips on how I determine the equation. Hopefully it helps you, okay? So, tips to determining the quadratic equations. I want you to look out for, these are the things that I want you to copy down. Okay, so the things that you're going to look out for so you can determine what type of equation it is if it's a quadratic graph. Okay, so first thing is number of x-intercepts. The number of x-intercepts is a massive giveaway on what type of equations you will be using. Okay? The other thing is turning points. Turning points also tell you what type of equations you're going to have or which ones you're going to use. And then how many clues are given in the question. Okay? If you think about why these are the important points, is because you think about how many types of equations have you seen for quadratic. I'll give you one. This is the first type. We call the general equation. You got ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the first type. Okay? Then your second type is you got your turning point form. So you got a bracket x plus h squared plus k or something like that. Okay? These are your two forms, but also there's a third form that you sort of done in exercise 3A, 3B without realizing, is your third form is when you factorize it, you get x plus b times x plus c. Now the reason why I'm telling you these three tips is because those three tips help you to determine which one is the easiest to solve. You see, with ax squared plus bx plus c, the only thing you can really read from this is not the number of x-intercepts you have. You don't know how many x-intercepts there are. You can tell what the y-intercept is, so I'm going to write on the side. The benefit of the first equation is you know what the y-intercept is. The benefit of the first equation is that you have a general equation. You can use quadratic formula to solve the x-intercepts and whatnot. Okay? Fair call. But if I don't give you the formula and I just gave you a graph, so let's say I did that. Okay? What you can tell from here is that it depends on what information I give you. So for example, if I gave you two x-intercepts, let's say I said 2 and 3. See, that doesn't help you because I only gave you two pieces of information. I only told you the coordinates for 2, 0, 3, 0. Why is that a problem? Because when you only have 2, 0, 3, 0, why can't you use the first equation? Because you've got how many unknowns? You've got 1, 2, 3. There are 3 unknowns that you don't know. So you only got 2 coordinates. There's no way you're going to be able to solve for A, B, and C. Okay, it's like elimination method. You had 2 unknowns and 2 equations. It's possible. In this case, it's not. Because you got 2 coordinates, and this one you don't. Whereas out of these 3, the nice thing about the turning point form is it tells you the turning point. See, if I told you the turning point here, if I just went back to the graph and I told you this was, I don't know, 1, negative 3, then you can go back to this and say, oh, negative 3 means goes down 3, so you know k has to be negative 3. If I knew that it went to the right by 1, then you knew this has to be x minus 1 all squared. That's why I was trying to teach you to memorize or to learn how to read the turning point form, because this allows you to tell right by 1 or left by 1. Down by 3 or up by 3. That's why if you have a turning point, you should be using this formula. Whereas if I didn't give you a turning point and I gave you 2 x-intercepts, the nice thing is this. Yes, there are 3 unknowns, A, B, and C, but if you know the x-intercept is at 2, then you should know that the first factor should be x minus 2 and this one should be x minus 3. You're questioning why? Why would I know that it's x minus 2 and x minus 3? Remember back in 3C, when you had 0 equals 2 and you had your brackets as x minus 2 and x minus 3, and I asked you, how do you solve for this? Use null factor law and you tell me x equals 2, x equals 3. See, that makes sense. See, this makes sense if you were to solve this. If you had x minus 2 equals 0, and you were to solve for it, plus 2 on both sides, x equals 2. So if you want to go backwards, minus 2 on both sides. X minus 2, that tells me my factor. X minus 2 is my factor. So that, what does that tell me? It tells me here that I've got x minus 2 and x minus 3, and the only thing I need to solve is A. And that's easier. See, but if I use the first equation, it doesn't help me. Because if I sub 2, 0 in, and I sub 3, 0 in, there's only 2 equations, but I got 3 unknowns. It's impossible to solve. Okay, so this is what I mean by find the number of x-intercepts, because the number of x-intercepts tells you whether you use this one or not. Find turning points, because if it's a turning point, you use a turning point form. How many clues given? In order to do this one, you need 3 clues. You need 3 different coordinates so that you can solve this. And this is where you do it on a calculator, and you do simultaneous of 3 equations. Okay, and I'm going to show you an example of that later, but the tips I'm giving you are 3 things. Find x-intercepts. How many x-intercepts are there in the graph? Are there any turning points? How many clues are given? Is it 3, 2, or 1? Okay, if they gave you 1, it's almost impossible to solve. They have to at least give you 2. Okay, let's have a look at some examples so you can see what I mean by... Oh, just ignore this for now. Don't look at that. Let's have a look at this. Okay, so it says, this is an easy question because they tell you the form already. Okay, they tell you the form. They tell you it's ax squared plus c. And they say, all right, I want you to find if the parabola in this family passes through 1, 7, so meaning when x is 1, y is 7. When x is 2, y is 10. Find the values of a and c. Now the nice thing is because it's easy because all you have to do is now you're saying, all right, well, if this is my equation, ax squared plus c, that's my equation. I've got my 2 coordinates. I've got my coordinates 1, 7, 2, 10. So when x is 1, y is 7, then I can substitute that in. I can say, all right, when x is 2, y is 10. See what I'm doing? I'm just replacing 2 there, so it becomes 2 squared. And then 10, that's my y coordinate. So it says y here, so I replace the y. Now obviously when you do 2 squared, that gives you 4 times a plus c, and this is your first equation. 2 unknowns, you don't know what a and c is, but you've got the first equation. So that's why I said the number of coordinates or number of information they give you allows you to solve the amount of unknowns. In our case, we've got 2 unknowns, I need 2 equations. Now I use the first coordinate to get 1 equation, so how do I get the second equation? Yeah, I use 1, 7. Because 1, 7 also tells me when x is 1, y is 7. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to, all right, well, when it's 1, 7, then I'll have, well, it's a bit cut off here, but it'll be, I'll just write it over here. It'll be 7 equals to a times 1 squared plus c. Because that's all I'm doing. I'm substituting 1 in, substitute 7 in. So I get 7 equals to a times 1 squared. Why do you want to do that? Because then that now gives you a plus c, or a plus c equals 7. And you got 2 equations. You got 10 equals 4a plus c, that's one equation. Your second equation is 7 equals a plus c. Now, in this exercise, if it's exam 1, you're going to have to do that by hand. So you're going to have to figure out what 10 equals 4a plus c and 7 equals a plus c. Use elimination method or substitution method to solve this. So this goes back to year 10 again and 9. Or, if it's not in exam 1, use a calculator. Okay, you remember how I showed you how to solve and you put in those 2 equations? Solve comma A, comma C, and it'll tell you the answer. But if you were to do it by hand, I like elimination method. It's up to you which method you like. I like elimination method. And right now I can see that's 1C, 1C. So if I just said take the top equation minus the second equation, C minus C will cancel out to be 0 C's. 4a take away a will give me 3a, and 10 take away 7 gives me 3. It's called elimination method because I can see that c minus c will cancel out and I've eliminated one variable or one unknown. So now you can say that means a must equal to 3 on 3, a equals 1. If you know a equals 1, then c has to be 6 because 1 plus c has to give you 7. So therefore, c must equal to 6. So that's doing it by hand. Otherwise, you can do it in a calculator. How's that feel? Good? Okay. Now I want to move into more... okay. Why is this not... I keep forgetting to hide these so that you don't see it. But if we have a look at this problem, I know there's no graphs yet, and the graphs is more interesting than this one. But Notice how many points they've given you. They've given you 1, 2, and 3. And I told you that if they give you 3 pieces of information, use the general equation, because there's 3 unknowns. There's A, B, and C. Find the rule for this parabola. So they might not have told you the rule for this one, but you should know. They didn't give you any turning points. They didn't give you any x-intercepts. They gave you a y-intercept, okay, but not an x-intercept. So when x equals 0, it gives you a y-intercept. So they gave you a y-intercept. Okay, so what they've done is they've told you what C is. They said when x is 0, you see if I gave you y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, and if I subbed that coordinate in, sub 0, these cancels out. And y equals 5, naturally I know 0 plus 0 plus c, therefore c must be 5. Okay? But you can see how I'm choosing the equations. I'm not choosing this equation. I'm not choosing y equals ax plus h squared plus k. Why didn't I choose this one? Because there's no turning point. So if there's no turning point, I'm going to have to work out h and k. It takes too long. But already from here, I already know what c is just by looking at the coordinates. Okay, so anytime if you get 3 pieces of information, 3 different coordinates, and none of it is the x-intercept, and none of it is a turning point, use this equation. Okay, so how do you use it? We just found out what c is. C is equal to 5. So now I know c. I know, like, okay, so that's 5. You still have another 2 coordinates, and you're back to exactly just like the previous example. If you sub 1, 4 in and negative 10 in, this is what it looks like. So I've got all the coordinates. Notice how I'm substituting them in. I sub 1, 4 in, I get an equation. I sub negative 10 in, I get an equation. I get 0, 5, I get an equation. What you'll end up with is this. Okay, now you're wondering, how do I get this? Same thing, I just had a plus b plus c, and c is 5. I know c is 5, so I'm just saying a plus b plus 5. That's my first equation. This is from using 1, 4. How do I get this coordinate? That was from using negative 1, 10. From down here, a minus b plus c, using that, but c is 5. And then you do elimination method again. So you're like, all right, if I did a minus a, that gives you 0. So I would just say minus each other. 5 minus 5 is 0. Negative b minus b is negative 2b. A minus a is 0. 10 minus 4 is 6. And suddenly you now have negative 2b equals 6. Therefore, b must equal to negative 3. And if you know what b is, then you can sub back in here. You can say negative of negative b plus c, and solve for a. Okay, and so that's what I did down here. So b is negative 3, so then to solve for a equals 2. Easy again? Yes? Hands up if that feels all right. Okay. Now, the one I'm more interested in is when I don't give you any of these and you have to figure it out yourself. Okay, so I give you a graph, and your job is to look at the graph and determine what type of equations you would use. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's go back to this one. Well, here we go. Let's look at this. Oh, why is it moving? Oh, and look at this. I don't know why it's doing that. It is black magic. You know what? There we go. I just print screened it. Here we go, so it won't change now. Okay, so I print screened this. Let's have a look. You got A. First things I asked you to do is find the number of x-intercepts, then find if there's a turning point, then see how many clues they've given you. So let's have a look. How many x-intercepts have they given you here? 1. Now that x-intercept we know is 0, 0, which happens to also be the turning point. So what do you... And the y-intercept. Now, out of all of them, let's look at the 3 equations we had. The 3 equations that I gave to you, I said you can either use y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. I said you can also use y equals to a bracket x plus h squared plus k. I said you can also use y equals to a bracket x plus b plus c. Use this when you have x-intercepts. Use this when you have a turning point. Use this when you don't have either, or you have three pieces of information. Now, I don't have three pieces of information, so the first thing I'm thinking about is cross out that first one. I'll look at the next two. I would use this if I had two x-intercepts, but right now I only got one. So I'm kind of like, well, since it's one, I can collect it as one if I wanted to, but I know that it's easier to use this. Why is it easier to use this? Because we already know the turning point is 0, 0. So what does that mean? I'm not moving left, so that means h is 0. I'm not moving left or right, and neither am I moving up or down. So isn't that easy? Because if you sub 0, 0 into this equation for a, you have now y equals to a x all squared, which is technically just saying ax squared. So just from 0, 0, I've narrowed down to one unknown. I just need to figure out what a is. So I need one more piece of information. What's that? Yeah, the other point. They told you 2, 5. They told you when x is 2, y is 5. So I'm like, oh, when x is 2, y is 5. So I should have 5 equals to 4a. Therefore, a must equal to 5 and 4. And you're able to solve. So those are my hints. Find number of x-intercepts. Find the number of, the turning point, and then find how many clues are given. Okay? Now I want you to work with me here. Let's have a look at each of these three. I want you just to name me, what type of equation would you choose? Would you choose the first one, second one, or third one? Okay, I'm going to call them. So this is 1, 2, or 3. Now some of them you can use either. Okay, there might be more than one, but I want you to name me the numbers. Let's look at B. You have a think? Now I'm going to ask you, and you're going to tell me whether you're using 1, 2, or 3. Okay? Which one would you use? We're looking at B. All right. Hands up for B if you're going to use number 1. Okay, we've got 2 people. So number 1 is 2. Hands up if you use number 2. Okay, we got about, there was 7 there. Hands up for number 3. 1, 2, 3. And let's have a look. Look, there is no right or wrong. It's up to you which one you want to use to make it work. For me, I would go with 2. But which ones also work? No, actually, I think only number 2. Because you don't have 3 information, you don't have 3 pieces of information, so you can't use number 1. You can't use number 3 because, yes, there are 2 x-intercepts, but what are those 2 x-intercepts? So they didn't tell me. But the only thing they did tell me is the turning point is at 0, 3. Because I know it's at 0, 3, it's so much easier solving for part B by simply doing this. B, if I know the turning point is at 0, 3, I can now say it's x plus 0, and it goes up by 3, so that's 3. That's not moving left or right, it goes up by 3, and suddenly I've changed my problem to ax squared plus 3. I only got one unknown. If you have one unknown, you're given that second coordinate to solve. Okay? So have a look at C. What would you use for C? Equations 1, 2, or 3. So look at it. How many x-intercepts do I have? How many have they given you? Okay, you want to know what the x-intercepts are. You want to know, have they given you a turning point? Have they given you 3 pieces of information? C. Hands up if you're going to choose number 1. You got 2. 2 for number 1. Hands up for number 2. 1. Hands up for number 3. It's like, I don't know, about 12 there. And yes, I would use number 3 myself, or 1. So if you chose 1 or 3, it works. Why? Because number 1, if you had 3 points, and you do, you got -1, 8, you got 0, 0, and you got 3, 0. Yes, you can type that in your calculator, solve for 3 unknowns, and you would get the answer. Or you can do it by hand, it will take ages. Or you can do it by hand with number 3 because you got 2 x-intercepts. And that's what I said, number 3, if you got 2 x-intercepts, you already know it's at 0 and 3. So your factors here should be x, and the factors for this one should be x minus 3. You don't know what a is, but they gave you another coordinate to sub in to find a. See what I'm doing there? Okay, so I'm choosing based on the information I'm given, number of x-intercepts, where they give me a turning point. This has no turning point, so I wouldn't use number 2. Okay? Let's have a little last one. D. Think about it. How many x-intercepts have I got? How many pieces of information have they given? And do I have a turning point? Then you decide which of these 3 you would use. Alright, same drill again. Hands up for number 1. No. Hands up for number 2. Okay, that's like, I don't know, maybe about 16. Hands up for number 3. Good. The answer is, I would go with number 2 as well, because you've got a turning point. 1, 6, so that means y equals to a, move to the right by 1, so x minus 1, and then up by 6, so plus 6. And then you sub in your 0, 8 to solve. Okay, is that feeling easier? Yeah, so those are the 3 types of equations. It's up to you to pick and choose which one works. That's a skill. Okay. All right, here we go. So these are the questions. Now, none of these are really choosing. They give you the equation, so it's actually easier. What I'm more interested in is if you do question 7. So go to question 7 and have a look at each one. Okay, and I want you to determine which of the 3 functions you would use to solve, because this is harder. This one's easier because they tell you what to use. They say use ax squared plus c, sub it in. Oh, sorry. I'm going to write it again. Question 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 14, 20. 21, use a calculator, because that's simultaneous of 3 equations, so use a calculator. Okay, but remember how I talk about study smart, not study hard? Question 7 is a good one. Okay, you can pick a few from here. You don't have to do all, just pick a few because they already gave you the equation. It's easy. Okay, it's the one where they don't give you an equation. For the exam, it's likely to be 7, 21, and any of the questions from 1 to 6. Those are the typical questions. They'll give you something like this, and they'll say find out A, B, and C. They'll give you a graph, and they'll say determine the equation. Or they give you 3 pieces of information, and they want you to solve it for 21 using a calculator. Okay? Or you have to learn how to do it by hand as well. All right? But it's unlikely that you're going to get it by hand 3 simultaneously. It takes too long. So you're not going to get that. But learn how to do it on a calculator. So that's 3K. 3K. If you still have questions, let me know so I can come around and clarify this concept.